Here we are. We are finally hitting the West Coast. And we're going to start in the Northwest with Washington State. Now, I'm going to introduce this movie, but you guys feel free to talk about whichever one you want. So we're here in Washington, and we're talking 2002, The Ring. So, Bernie, start us off with The Ring.
I know The Ring because it was an adaptation of one of the original Japanese movies in the late 90s, I want to say into the early aughts, with movies like Dark Water and man, what was it? Was it Gus? Not Gus Van Sant. He directed Pirates of the Caribbean, and he also has a name that starts with a G. But I think he's the one who directed The Ring.
Gore Verbinski.
Was it The Grudge?
Thank you.
Like that?
Gore Verbinski.
Gore Verbinski.
Yeah.
And outside of, again, kind of it's a horror movie that actually has like really good directing, like really good cinematography. The visuals are really stunning for a movie that you would think is, a cash grab to get a bunch of teenagers to go into the theater to just kind of play off this premise that in Japanese films worked out so well. And then all of a sudden they're trying to do something here in the States to kind of, just again, make money off this premise that's worked before. It's a great looking movie. The premise is pretty interesting, I will say. And it's been a while since I've seen it. I want to say it spawned sequels. I want to say it's been rebooted, but like some of the other movies we've talked about, I saw it once and I never saw it again, but I just remember it was really interesting. And that's why I'll give it to Andrew, who will have more intelligent things to say about this movie.
Well, Pete, I thought he was going to say The Grunge too. I was like, that's not at all The Grunge. Yeah. So this one that has a great element that, you didn't see inside, the American horror genre before, of bringing, kind of bringing technology into the paranormal, specifically like with vengeful spirits. The Ring and Pulse, which I think is also another import that was remade from Japan, where you're tying this vengeful spirit to electronics. And the Ring was I think it did a very good job for what it was aiming to do. And it was I remember seeing in theaters. I remember being a little bit suspicious of phone calls for the next, few months. I think I've rewatched it twice. I've never seen any of the sequels or the reboot, outside of, whatever's been represented in Scary Movie.
Pete, what do you got on The Ring?
Yeah, not too much more.
Wow.
I mean, when the film started coming out, like the horror movies came out with like a PG-13 rating, that to me usually said like, I'm not going to enjoy this too much. So, for better or for worse, I kind of just took a dim view of horror movies that came out with PG-13 ratings, because I think they were marketed and catered towards that younger audience, and to make sure that they got into the theater, it just kind of softened it up a little too much for me. But I mean, there are some effective things about The Ring. I like, Andrew, what you said about the technology. I thought that was an interesting development. I mean, Naomi Watts, I think, carries the movie. I think with someone else in that role, this movie probably would have been instantly forgettable for me. So I think that's to its credit. But yeah, I haven't seen any of the sequels. I haven't seen the remake. I don't think I've seen this once when it came out. I was intrigued by it. And yeah, I mean, I think to give a little plug for quite similar, but a movie that kind of takes the technology thing that came out recently during the pandemic, was this movie Host, which I thought was really effective, very well done. It's short. I think it's barely over an hour, but it cleaned up a couple of awards recently. And yeah, it's similar, kind of just using technology and, some paranormal entity, but doing it very effectively. Not, I thought that was really well done. So if you like The Ring and you like that whole subgenre of evil spirits infecting and using technology to scare and attack and kill people, and if you haven't seen it, I definitely would recommend Host.
Well, Pete and Andrew, I have to argue a point. I disagree with you that they brought up the idea of technology as the fear factor. or using technology, because one of my favorite films, and it is a horror film, Poltergeist, the whole aspect of the television and speaking through that TV freaked me out, because we had the snow. End of the day, that snow comes on, and you turn the wrong channel. Absolutely, utilizing that 23-inch, oak box TV freaked me out as a kid, because that was my TV. That was in my house, and I wasn't turning it on. I definitely wasn't going to have it on snow, because there was going to be a little girl talking to me. So
I remember snow. I'm not that much of a millennial,
but I do, I do think that from a using technology in horror films, I think Poltergeist kind of set the bar on that one. And
I'll give you that. I'll give you Poltergeist did have, this synergy with technology, but I feel, to defend myself, that the VHS cassette depicted in The Ring was the vessel in which this entity was, where in Poltergeist it was more like the lack of media was a channel of communication, not necessarily a portal.
But 2002, a VHS tape? Really?
The pinnacle of technology.
The DVD back then. Come on.
Well, it wouldn't be scary if there was DVD, because you'd have, the extended cut and then the extra features, the director's commentary.
So kids, millennials watching The Ring in 2002 weren't freaking out because they didn't know what a VHS tape was.
Well, the reboot has a Nokia phone that rings.
But I freaked out about Poltergeist and a TV with snow on it and a little girl talking to me. Help me, Daddy, Mommy. Anyway,
I think the most terrifying aspect was adjusting the tracking on the VHS tape. I mean, that always brings a shiver down the spine.
It absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're gonna keep moving. You guys, all right? The Ring. We're getting here. All right. I think you guys are gonna be excited about this one as we head down the trail. We are not gonna die of dysentery here, but we're heading to Oregon, and we're heading back to another classic, 1980s, the man, the myth, John Carpenter. Pete, I know this is one of your absolute favorites, so I'm gonna throw it to you with The Fog. Talk to me about The Fog here.
Well, The Fog is, it's an atmospheric event that happens when the temperature in one level is higher or lower. You know what I'm talking about, and that's how you get fog.
Thank you for the weather report.
Yeah, stay tuned. I'll be back with the 5-day forecast and.
And now your local news.
And let's throw it to Jim with sports. Now, I love The Fog. This was John Carpenter wanting to tell a scary ghost story, and I think he, knocked it out of the park. Another one that I think has gained status over time. I think when it was released, like a lot of horror movies, it was more easily dismissed. But there's just a ton of great elements to this. Everything from John Houseman at the beginning telling a ghost story to a bunch of kids around the campfire. Again, another great John Carpenter score, just some eerie atmospherics. Jamie Lee Curtis, Tom Atkins, Adrienne Barbeau, Hal Holbrook. You've got Rob Bottin doing the makeup effect. I mean, you got
Janet Leigh. You got the original. You got Janet Leigh.
Jamie Lee Curtis's mom. Yes, Janet Leigh. We just talked about Psycho. So, I think for the genre, for what it was, this was a heavy hitter. It did not do well at the box office. And, I think John Carpenter, like a bunch of his films, I think has a bit of a chip on his shoulder because of that. But I've always loved it. Another early 80s, coming of age horror movie that scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. And, I still enjoy watching it to this day.
You think John Carpenter thought, they don't like this one? I'm going to make They Live, and they're going to really hate me.
I'm going to film a 12-minute sequence of Rowdy Roddy Piper and Keith David beating the crap out of each other.
Greatest fight scene in movie history. All right, Bernie, talk to me about The Fog. You're another John Carpenter disciple.
That's right. I love this movie. This, sometimes you could probably get me in the right mood to argue if this or Halloween is my favorite John Carpenter film. Like Pete said, it's just like a perfect campfire story. Everything about the pacing, the that scene in the beginning. We were just talking about Poltergeist, where all of those poltergeist-like activities in the town are happening. And I had a longer discussion, a more detailed discussion just about the fog with a writer on a previous episode. His name's Oren Gray. I've been happy enough to work with him on he's a writer, and I've done covers for some of his books, and some of the things that he brought up about this film were really interesting. So that might be worth checking out if you want to hear a really in-depth discussion. But something about that intro that's just so cool, with Houseman telling the story, the poltergeist activity. It's like Carpenter is taking his time with the film, and it does feel like these things are happening around the town that only we as the audience can see. So you don't know these characters. It's not like Tom Atkins and Jamie Lee Curtis. They actually don't meet the other people in the church at the end of the movie. Like, there's these two subsets of the cast that are having their own adventures during the traumatizing events of this fog that's rolling in. But I don't know, there's something really interesting about this film, the way it's paced, the casting, the tone. It just feels perfect. I love this film around Halloween.
Can I ask a question? And I apologize, but you guys know, as someone who is not a big horror fan, I've never seen it. I know, I apologize. I have a very basic question. Couldn't people just close their windows or drive away from the fog?
I don't think you understand how supernatural, mystical fog works, Doug.
Was it centered in this one town?
Yes.
Or did it cover a landscape? One town.
One town.
And they couldn't just go driving out of town.
To your point,
arguably, I think you could just drive east away from the coast and maybe, but let's assume, Doug, because this is revenge fog, which is the worst kind of fog.
It is.
Let's assume that even if you drove all the way north and took the Idaho transfer across the Midwest and took a few wrong turns, even if all of these travels were giving you the Jeepers Creepers, it wouldn't matter, because in the end, whatever terror you felt at 10 Killer, the fog would get you.
And Bernie is shining right now.
Wow, you are. I would trade that soliloquy for Jennifer's body any day.
And mind you,
I will say congratulations.
Nice.
To answer your question though, Doug, people do attempt to drive away from the fog, and people do shut their doors and windows, but this fog is very sneaky, kind of like with the SNL skit with the Jaws, with the land shark. It will knock on doors, and then when people go to answer the doors, what they should not be doing, because the fog is literally glowing.
Just roll up a towel, a beach towel, and shove it at the bottom of your door.
Doug, you just got to see the movie. Like, they come up with the ultimate solution. That's to get all the fans that are in the town and direct it back at the coast, and the fog just blows away.
Okay. All right. I think I'm good with it. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this apparently epic movie? Yes, and I know I'm in the minority on this one. Talk to me about the fog.
Well, I'm angling to get on the 18-part episode where we just fangirl over John Carpenter. Cool. But yeah, this movie is one of the 100 in my top 10. Love it. I think it blows away the remake too, because they tried to remake it and just modernize it, and it didn't have that same feeling, that same Carpenter magic that permeates this one.
Was the fog digital in the remake?
Yeah. It's atrocious.
Didn't have the same billowiness.
They had no dry ice.
They did not. Doug, the remake is very much that CW horror, where you would look at the cast, and the actor who played Superman in Smallville is the lead. So
never mind.
I mean, really talking about like CW.
Moving on.
But no, we're not talking about the reboot. Andrew, by all means, please keep waxing poetic about John Carpenter's The Fog, because it deserves it. Such a good movie.
I digress. We do have to have an episode titled Andrew's 100 top 10. Go ahead, Andrew.
I mean, there's really nothing more I can expand on this movie. It belongs on this list. I'm very happy to see it here. I revisit it all the time. I'm happy to be in Oregon right now.
right. Well, we're down to it. We got 2 states left. We've decided Andrew and I are going to Vegas to get married by Elvis. So we're going to stop in Nevada and get our blood taken. But while we're doing that, when we're in Nevada, we're going to talk about a movie that another one that I like. And I think it's going to go against Pete's point of when you see PG-13, your head kind of goes down when it comes to horror. But we're talking about Tremors from 1990. I think this movie, I thought it was fun. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought they basically took the leftovers from the Dune set and, said, all right, guys, we got some time, make a movie. Pete, what do you think about Tremors?
I got worms.
They were infected by a fog.
Oh, they're called graboids. It's copyrighted.
I'll probably disappoint everyone by saying I've never seen Tremors in its entirety, which it should be up my alley because I do like a good creature feature. I don't know if it was I couldn't get over Mr. Keaton starring in a movie, that he wasn't playing Alex P's dad, so maybe that might have had something to do with it. But I don't know. This was one. It kept bypassing me. So I would stumble upon it on TV. I'd watch a couple of minutes. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. But then I should really watch this from the beginning. And then I just never got around to watching it from the beginning. So
are you like me? You can't see Kevin Bacon as anything other than Ren in Footloose? Is that it?
Well, I mean, since we're talking horror, I mean, Kevin Bacon got his start in the original Friday the 13th. So I do associate him with him there as well. So
Andrew, what do you think? Andrew, what do you think?
I really like this movie. It's a fun popcorn film. The characters are, great kind of mixture of down to earth, but yet outlandish parodies of, what you would expect. It definitely is something that grabs your attention and then pulls it underground and drags you around for quite a bit. I can't say that for any of the sequels or the series or the sequels that after the series, once you start getting to ass blasters and I guess the ass blasters are the flying ones too. There's a third type of creature. Anyway, I can only attest for the singular Tremors, and I recommend it wholeheartedly.
Bernie,
how do you follow up ass blasters?
I mean, it's I don't envy you.
You know what? I'm with Pete on this one. This Tremors never really made much of an impression on me. Like, I think I've seen it on USA, like on Sunday afternoons, maybe like 10 times. And if you aggregate it all 10 times, I probably still haven't seen the entire movie. But I know enough about the movie to not have gone out and sought out the movie or the sequels or the series or the reboots. I don't know. There's something about this that just never really stuck with me. And I wonder if it's because it's that PG-13 horror that Pete, you were talking about, that I just know. I'm just like, I want to mainline my horror. So either give me like an R rating or something that's hardcore, like I Spit on Your Grave, that I'll watch, albeit reluctantly, in between the slots of like my hands over my eyes. But don't give me this. Like, give me something that has a little less comedy, a little bit less of this, because I love creature features, don't get me wrong, and the idea for this is interesting, but this one just never did anything for me.
But Bernie, you were literally their core demographic. It came out in 1990. You were what? You were 13, right?
Yeah. This is the movie that I should have seen. This is the movie I should have seen at Blockbuster.
This rating was made for you, Bernie.
I walked right past it to rent Time Cop in Highlander.
There you go. You got to remember though, Ron Underwood directed this, and just to give you a little bit of his catalog, after Tremors, he did City Slickers, so he hit it big. So comedy was always kind of his point, but he also has one of the worst movies ever made under his belt, The Adventures of Pluto Nash. One of the worst movies probably ever created. Eddie Murphy, I know, tries to forget that he was ever in it. It was just lambasted and just not done very well at all. But then he came back with Santa Baby, so he's got that.
So spiritually, Tremors has gone to space.
Yes. Ron took something to space, and it wasn't very nice. All right, so you know what? I'm glad we took care of Tremors. The wedding was fantastic, and now it's time to head to the last state, the big one on the West Coast. We're going to Hollywood. We're going to California. The funny thing is, with California, obviously one movie doesn't do it justice. One horror film doesn't do it justice. We'll talk about the one that's on the map for all of our fans that are following breathlessly, waiting for us to get to it. Again, we're back at Wes Craven, and this is Wes, excuse me, we're informal here, taking his genre that he became known for and flipping it on his ear and saying, take a look at this, we're going to mix it all up again. And he started off this amazing world of Scream. So Bernie, I'm going to let you kind of kick us off with Wes Craven's Scream.
So this movie is really meta, and Wes Craven deserves all the accolades, but I give a lot of credit to Kevin Williamson, who wrote the script for this. And I'm not sure where this came before or after Dawson's Creek, but we've kind of joked around about that CW, the CWs in the 90s with Felicity and Smallville and all of these shows that have become renowned for kind of being, I don't know, like kiddie pop type material. Like it's not really there's not like, it's not meant to be really great, but you get these actors that then move on to these sort of forgettable horror movies. But Kevin Williamson, you could tell he definitely grew up on John Hughes and John Carpenter. He saw teens who were supposed to be more educated, and their exchanges were meant to be more fun and more interesting than people of their age. And then on top of that, you layer all of this meta knowledge about horror movies that's actually represented in the movie. I can't remember the actor's name. He wasn't black, but he's more of the comic relief, although to be fair, there's some comic relief in Scream. But the guy who works at the video store.
Matthew Lillard or
not the other guy.
Not Deputy Dwight.
No. Nope.
Jamie Kennedy?
Thank you. Jamie Kennedy from the Kennedy Experiment.
Go. Yeah.
He was actually one of the first, I think they were known as like the Blockbuster Bunch. It was like a bunch of kid actors who very much did like these really cheesy early 90s commercials where they would say, hey, it's totally rad not to have late fees. And oh my God, totally, please be kind, rewind. So he was one of those guys. But the character he plays is all of us. He's the guy in the mom and pop video store telling people, if you've seen all of these movies, if you've watched Wes Craven, then you know what happens next. You know how the killer, how this is supposed to happen. And then on top of that, to have Wes Craven, who's one of the godfathers of this genre, direct it. I don't know. Scream is definitely a really great, like, shot in the arm of horror movies. When I was going to the theater, and Pete, we've talked about this before, like, where you would see movies like Jeepers Creepers in the theater. And it wasn't because you were a fan of Jeepers Creepers. It was just a reason to go to the theater. Scream was one of those movies that made me excited because I knew it was a little bit of a love letter to Halloween, to the Friday the 13th series, to Nightmare, to everything Wes Craven had helped create. And at the same time was trying to do something new. And it succeeded.
Right. So this was at a different time. This was 1996. And, you're talking about all those horror films, and they were just on repeat mode at that point. You got your 12th Nightmare and your 7th Friday the 13th and Halloween 26 going to space. And they were all getting, as much as the horror geeks love them, they were getting tired. And him relaunching this whole entire genre and giving it a shot of adrenaline, I think it was fantastic. I mean, you talk about Kevin. This was his first writing out of the box. He went from this to I Know What You Did Last Summer. Then he did the sequel, The Faculty, Teaching Mrs. Tingle, Scream 3, Cursed. I mean, he just nailed it. And yes, Dawson's Creek was after this. So Pete, what are your thoughts when it comes to the Scream series?
It's another one of those. I liked it at the time. I don't really go back and revisit the Scream movies too much. Like they're a jumble at this point, so I would not be able to even pick out the plot points separating them. But again, at the time, I definitely enjoyed the original. I liked the meta aspect of it because, like you were just saying, Doug, like there was a lot of like all those franchises were like still, I think, chugging along, but they were just churning out some awful sequels. I remember there was the one Halloween movie with Busta Rhymes, and the scariest thing about it was coming home to my apartment, and my roommate had left the back door open. So we came back, and like the door was wide open, and we were all scared shitless for like a good 45 minutes while we were convinced that there was a killer in our apartment. Spoiler alert, there wasn't, so it all worked out well. But but yeah, that's kind of what I was going to the theater to see, and it just you're like, please give me something to be like, oh, this was decent. And all those movies were just getting worse and worse. So to have something that was more self-aware, that was really well done, that had a good cast, like I think Bernie, you said, it was a good shot in the arm. And
you look at the cast. I mean, this was a Gen Xer's delight. It had, the who's who of Gen X: Nev Campbell, Dave Arquette, Courtney Cox, Matthew Lillard, Skeet Ulrich, Rose McGowan, and then you throw in Drew and you throw in Henry Winkler. It had an amazing cast. They just hit it out of the park with casting. I think it was spot on. And it was Gen X personified right there in that cast. And I think they hit it on every cylinder.
I think one of the really smart things that they did was that opening scene with Drew Barrymore, because again, it was, there's a little bit of that misdirection because, you didn't quite really know what was going to happen because, it hadn't kind of embedded itself into the public consciousness yet. But to kind of give you that homage to a movie that we had seen so many times before, but done really well. And then like, oh shit, okay, well, Drew Barrymore is no longer in this movie. So where do we go from here? So again, like we were talking before with Psycho, like you upend the apple cart and you've got carte blanche to kind of take it wherever. So I think that was, just a stroke of genius to kind of open it the way that they did.
All right, Pete. So before I throw it to Andrew, you and I, we're gonna recreate Andrew and Bernie watching this in the theater. Okay, when the opening scene, because you got Drew, you got the phone call, you got the creepy voice. What are they pointing out? What plot points are we picking on? What are we saying? Ooh, wait a minute. Is she going to be the first one done? No, that's Drew Barrymore. She's going to make it to the end. She's the biggest star in the movie.
Drew Barrymore's a huge star. Yeah, there's no way they wouldn't kill her off this quickly.
Absolutely. This is a great teaser, though. It's probably going to take it to the end. It's probably going to come around full circle at the end, and she's going to end up being the last girl. So I totally expect her to be around. Oh my God, what just happened? Yeah. So thank you, Bernie.
Nailed it.
Andrew.
Great job.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Bernie and I would use our telepathic link because it's just rude to talk in the theater.
All right, Andrew, give us your take on the world that is Scream. Because when we talk about, age and we talk about hitting a generation. Now, Bernie, you were a senior, if I remember correctly, when this came out, or maybe just out of high school. But Andrew, you were just a wee one when this was coming out. So when did you first see Scream?
I'm gonna say I did see it in the theater. I'm trying to remember. Because 96, no, I was not. I would have been 6. I've been 9 at the time.
Taker that let you in, they should be fired.
Well, his dad hit him under his coat. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was my sister and I went in a trench coat. Yeah, I want to say I saw this in the theater. It might have been maybe about 2 years later on rental because I've seen The Sixth Sense in theaters. I've seen around 98, 99. That's when I started going to the theater a lot more for R and PG-13 and stuff like that. Stuff above my age weight. But yeah, like Pete said, that opening scene is such a great kind of like out of everything, every movie we've seen on this map. Like there's some that are obvious. Yeah, of course, this movie is that state, and then others. It's just like, this movie doesn't fit really the feel of this. I feel like Scream is the one movie on this list that really I didn't think of at first and was delighted to see representing California. Because like Bernie said, it's a love letter to horror movies. You have all these tropes that all these horror movies are using, all these slasher films are using, but the way that it's like remixed and retold and then adding that meta play to really cater to the fans. This is a fan movie where you're throwing all the cards on the table that the director would consciously keep in his head when he's going through the editing process. And so it's like another kind of layer of, is like thinking 2 steps ahead for all the meta that you have to do. And just like, especially like at the end when the characters are, when we are, we see who the killers actually are, and they're actually playing out how they would see the ending go in order to try to get away with the crime. It really is, this really refreshing thing for the time, because it allowed for the reusing of all these elements, but just the mixture was so unique in its way. And it's, it does feel kind of labored with the sequels that go forward. It kind of loses that luster, that originality that the first one definitely had. So that's I believe it also got turned into a TV show, which I haven't seen, but
it did. Yeah, it was on MTV. And when I think about this movie, it does feel like that 90s MTV byproduct, because it's witty, it's hip, it's self-aware. But something, sure, Andrew, you were just talking about with the ending, the fact that outside of all the nods that they're making to the existing horror films, the classic ones, right? The fact that the killers are already thinking about book deals and interviews and being on 60 Minutes. And there's something really interesting about the fact that these guys are already thinking about taking advantage of media and how they're going to be able to go in a courtroom and basically create a scene. And I'm just thinking like this is the byproduct of court TV and the like popularity of cable TV, where people are seeing how their image and they're seeing how they can create this whole other, like, I don't know, like a brand.
Yeah, it's the kind of like the swelling of influencer being a societal staple point way before that actually being the term.
That definitely is lost in the sequels, because all of that interesting, just, I don't know, the stuff that makes it really, really fun because it is self-aware gets lost along the way. And I'll say something we haven't talked about, but in our map we've covered Michael Myers in Halloween, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. Child's Play was an honorable mention for Illinois, so let's throw in Chucky into the map. Pumpkinhead, the Creeper from Jeepers Creepers, and I don't know where, and Leprechaun, but in that whole team photo, I would throw Ghostface in the photo. I mean, it's definitely more of a modern day slasher, but I think there's also something about the accessibility of the costume, because I didn't grow up with Party Cities in every strip mall, but I grew up going to Woolworth and seeing like the Ben Cooper mask. Like those were out there, and you would put it on and you would hurt your lips because if you tried to speak, your tongue would get caught in that plastic. But the fact that you could go to a Party City, a Walmart, a Target, and see a Ghostface mask, it makes it that much easier for kids to dress up as Ghostface and just kind of continue to perpetuate the idea that, like, oh, I don't know what that is, but I'm sure you do have a bunch of 9-year-old Andrews out there who are probably familiar with Ghostface but have never even seen the movie, because it's an accessible costume. All you need is a blanket that's black and you cut it up a little bit and you go buy like a $10 mask.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why I want to say I saw it in theaters, because I remember seeing the movie and then going as Ghostface for that Halloween, and I was like one of 12 Ghostface just in my middle school class alone.
It was the Princess Elsa of its day.
And to be fair, and this is where the sequels again are more lackluster, but the second one starts in an homage to the first one by saying, well, what if a movie was made of the events of Scream as if it really happened, except now it's called Slash. And then there's a movie premiere, and I want to say it's Jada Pinkett Smith, and I can't think of the other actor that's her boyfriend, who's at this theater premiere, and everyone in the audience is wearing Scream masks, and it just sounds right. It feels like exactly what would happen when Scream came out. You would have Andrew dressing up as Ghostface for Halloween, because of course that's what every other kid on his block was doing. And because the movies lose their luster a little bit, at least they didn't go into space. So that's something.
Not yet.
But at least the first one feels like a perfect California movie to be on this map that does deserve revisiting if you haven't seen it in a while.
So California is our last state, even though there are two more in our United States, but we're doing continental. But I wanted to throw it out to you because California is the mecca of movies. If you were to take Scream out and replace it, just because there's so much to choose from, I'm going to put you guys out there. I have mine, and I brought it up earlier. What movie would replace it on the map? For me, it is Poltergeist, because it falls back to previous things we've talked about where it's absolutely identifiable with California. B, that house is one you want to visit. It was a quintessential, late 70s, early 80s house. It just fit the time perfectly. And everything about that movie was California, from mom and dad, smoking a little reefer in bed, to the kids. It just felt to the medium coming in, bringing her in to kind of find Carol Ann. I think everything about that movie, and again, we're talking 19, just fit California. So I would absolutely put that on a sidecar on this road trip as we're passing through California. You guys have any horror movies that kind of jump out at you for California being identifiable?
Well, first, that's a great choice, Doug. I mean, that's almost perfect just from the filmmaking. I mean, that's totally nailing it. If I had to pick one, I would say the first Paranormal Activity, which I was kind of, I won't say blown away, but I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that in the theater, because they did such an effective job of ramping up the tension in that. The theater was mostly packed when I saw it, and you felt every time the camera movement did that fast forward while they were sleeping, and you heard that low audio rumble kind of building, you felt the tension in the theater. Like I really, like, people were like gripping the arms of their theater seats, and then and there was the release, there were screams. It was a great movie experience that you don't find as much these days. Like, I think when we were kids, you may have got that a bit more, and I was just, like I said, I was just pleasantly surprised to have that experience in the theater. Me and my friend Thomas saw that, and we both walked out and just kind of like, well, I mean, that totally exceeded expectations. So that would be my choice.
Bernie, what do you got? Anything?
I had to look it up because, I mean, part of the point of the map is that these movies are supposed to have a connection to the state, thus why they're on the map. We have found that not to be true more often than not, where it just happens to be some sort of peripheral connection to it, or it was filmed there and maybe there's some connection, barely. But looking up online, The Lost Boys, that doesn't strike me as a California film, but it does, like, it's a classic that deserves to be mentioned on this, along with Poltergeist. And I think by that nature, Night of the Comet, which is one of my favorite movies, a great 80s classic that I think, to be fair, is completely underrated and forgotten by too many people, because it's such a good movie that has nods to Romero. And I had such a crush on the actress for Night of the Comet. But I think, Pete, we've talked about Night of the Comet before, and I think we both have an affinity for that movie. But again, both that or Lost Boys, I don't necessarily associate with California. Scream feels like a California movie. The Paranormal Activities, it just feels like that was shot in Beverly Hills or somewhere like that. It just looks like California, so that feels right.
Well, I mean, Lost Boys, just for the pier scene alone, screams California. So I mean, you're spot on there. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and the caves that they lived in, that's California all the way. I mean, Andrew, anything come to mind for finishing off California?
Pete and Bernie have two really good ones. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. which the 78 in San Francisco. Wonderful film. I'm maybe hard pressed to say that it's, it feels very Californian other than, the pod people. But, definitely it does kind of go around with the scenery within San Francisco. I think it feels very San Francisco-y, and it's just a great suspenseful film. I think we can classify this as horror.
Yeah, sort of sci-fi. All right. So again, I mean, I think, but you're right. I think California hit the nail on the head with Scream. It is a quintessential California movie. I think it takes all the tropes and throws it in there. So this is it. We have finished our road trip across America, across the United States of horror here at Fan2Fan. I hope everybody enjoyed the ride. I know we did. I know picking up Pete as a hitchhiker early on was great. And then, of course, they left me and I had to run behind the RV until they ran out of gas for a while. But Andrew, we want to thank you for being our resident horror expert and pulling things out of your butt that nobody knew. So thank you for having that sage wisdom. Bernie, you as always surprised me when it comes to your vast amount of knowledge and the way that you can be just poetic about movies that almost nobody would care about.
In that vein, the movie, Pete, you were referencing earlier is Halloween Resurrection. I just couldn't, like, my OCD was like, well, the one with Busta Rhymes, I wanted to lean in and just say Halloween Resurrection. And Busta Rhymes does like jump kick or drop kick Michael Myers in the chest. I just had to clear that up for anyone who was thinking that we could get away with not referencing the correct Halloween sequel.
It was so bad.
That's the one where they put a bunch of reality TV cameras everywhere, right?
Yes, in the Michael Myers house.
It was awful. Yes, and if I remember correctly, that was the one where they tried to, in a way, like reboot Michael Myers because they had set up, I think, another killer to actually kind of take on the mantle. Again, Doug, there's way too much stuff about horror movies that if you put the three of us together, Pete, Andrew, and to be fair, Andrew, you're leading the charge here. If we put the three of us together, there's more about horror movies that we know than we should.
Yeah. Quick, let's double back across the country.
Say, well, where do we go from here? Do you guys want to tackle the Canadian provinces? We'll do that next.
To be fair, the polar ice caps movies like The Thing, and there's some good international horror out there. I think I don't want to speak for everyone, but once we finish up this episode, I kind of will be happy to see this map in the rear view.
It's a shame. I had one of my top 1,000 is in Alaska.
For all the listeners,
what is it? Is it Balto?
It's Balto, yes.
Absolutely. So Alaska, 30 days a night, honorable mention. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And then Hawaii, we got anything that jumps out real quick as we get back in our Batcopter? Is there any horror on Hawaii? I don't know. I don't think there is.
There's like Guam and Puerto Rico. I'm having been born in Puerto Rico, like I actually was born there and I lived there until I was 3. I know there's the legend of the Chupacabra, and I would imagine that there has to be a really terrible direct to like VHS movie about the Chupacabra made sometime in like the 90s. If there isn't, that would be surprising to me. But that's all I can think of that's really associated with Puerto Rico. Hawaii, I can't think of anything that's horror related.
I'll give you 2, and you guys can choose which one you want. You got Mega Shark versus Crocosaurus, or Mega Shark versus Mecha Shark. So I think we'll leave that to the fans and let them battle over that until we come back, because I think we're going to finally put this road trip to bed. This has been fantastic. On behalf of Bernie and Pete and Andrew, I'm Doug. We are Fan2Fan. We enjoyed this road trip, and we will see you next time.